This week it's another listening exercise and we're going to have a story. Now you will need your exercise books. Go to page 44 of Project 4 and you will see there that we have a story. It's all about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and this particular story is called Sir Bedivere and Excalibur. And during the story, I'm going to ask you 4 questions, which you must write down the answers into a file on your computer and then send to me in an email. And at the end of the story, I'm going to tell you the name of 2 films that you might like to watch. Again, write down the names of these 2 films along with your answers to the questions and email them to me. Now, the last part of the story is not in your books, and the last 2 questions are all about the last part of the story, so you must listen carefully. Okay, here we go. Sir Bedivere and Excalibur. Long, long ago, there lived a famous king. His name was Arthur, and he was the king of the Britons. King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table fought many battles. Arthur's last battle was against his own son, Mordred, at Camlan. The armies started fighting early in the morning, and the battle lasted all day. When they finished fighting, Mordred was dead, and the king was badly wounded. Only one of Arthur's knights survived, Sir Bedivere. After the Battle of Camlan, Sir Bedivere took the wounded king to the island of Avalon. And now we have our first question. What happened at the Battle of Camlan? Now we go back to the story. The island was in the middle of a lake. Arthur knew the lake well. He remembered receiving his magic sword Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake when he was a young man. "I need to return Excalibur to the lake," he said to Sir Bedivere, but he was too weak to move, so the knight offered to take the sword. "Throw the sword out into the middle of the lake," said the king. Sir Bedivere promised to do it. The knight stood on the shore of the lake and looked at Excalibur. It was such a beautiful sword, he couldn't imagine throwing it away. He decided to keep it. And now we stop for question number 2. Where did Arthur get Excalibur from? Now on with the story. On the way back to the king, he stopped to hide the sword in the bushes. He remembered to mark the place and then went back to the king. "Have you done it?" asked King Arthur. "Yes, your majesty," said Sir Bedivere. The king smiled. "Tell me," he said, "what did you see?" "Nothing," said the knight. The king stopped smiling. "You didn't throw the sword into the lake," he said. "Go back and do it." Sir Bedivere didn't want to throw the sword into the water, but he agreed to do it and went back to the lake. He picked up the sword and started to throw it, but he couldn't do it. He hid the sword again and went back to the king. Again, the king asked him, "What did you see?" "Nothing happened," he said. "The sword just fell into the water." King Arthur was very angry. He refused to believe the knight's story. "I see that I must do it myself," he said, and tried to stand up. The wounded king tried hard to stand up, but he was too weak. Sir Bedivere hated seeing the king like this, so he promised to do what the king wanted. He went back to the lake. On the way, he stopped to get the sword from the bushes. He stood on the shore of the lake, lifted the sword above his head and threw it with all his strength out into the middle of the lake. And now we have our third question. Where did Sir Bedivere hide the sword? Now we continue with the story. Excalibur flew through the air. Then, as it fell towards the water, something amazing happened. A woman's arm came up out of the lake and caught the sword. The arm waved Excalibur 3 times in the air. Then the arm and the sword slowly sank down into the dark waters of the lake and disappeared. When Sir Bedivere told King Arthur about the arm, the king started smiling again. "Ah, the Lady of the Lake," he said. Then he closed his eyes and died. And now, that's the end of the story. One final question. Who caught the sword? And before we finish, as I said before, I'm going to tell you about 2 films that you might want to watch if you can find them online or anywhere, all about King Arthur. The first one is called King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, and the second one, which we started watching before school finished, is called The Kid Who Would Be King. They are both about the legend of King Arthur, so watch them if you can. And don't forget, write down the names of those films along with your answers and send them to me in an email. I look forward to receiving them. Good luck.